What do you got for me?
What's wrong with you people?
I got nothing for you.
What's wrong?
You're not David. How y'all feel this morning? I feel rotten. That's how I feel. Well, that was enough for me. We could have had the benediction right there. That was so good.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to The Reformatory, the podcast for the local church and by the local church, and we are your local churchmen. My name is Josh, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host in crime, the captain, Jack Berry. Jack, my friend, you can probably hear it in my voice.
Oh, yeah.
I am still not well.
Still a little bit roughed up, man.
Dude, so we have had weeks of sickness that have ripped through the Skagit Valley and our church, right? And whenever you have a church with a bunch of little kids, it's always, like that first domino falls and it's bing, 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 bing. And you're like, all right, I'll see you in a month. Right.
I'll see you in a month.
I'm not a guy that gets sick often. Like, my immune system's pretty good. It's all the dirt I ate as a kid, right? I got hit with what I found out afterward is influenza type A, which apparently is the worst influenza that there is. Anyway, I don't know how they judge that. But, dude, this has put me on my tail, and I have zero energy. I'm tired all the time. Thankfully, the fever's gone. But, we had no ep last week because I was out.
you were out for the count.
I'm in week 4 of being sick, and I'm not contagious or anything like that, but the cough and it's all still there. And I'm starting to think this is just life now. This is just, dude. Frustrations of a small Reformed church. We share, you know how the Act says that they held all things in common, right?
Yep.
We do that, including sickness.
Yep, pretty much, dude. It's
what we do. Right?
Yep.
It's very unifying of us. But we're here. We made it. And another year of us not being chosen for the podcast sweepstakes, or what is it? The podcast. The tournament. The tournament.
Yeah. March Madness tournament podcast tournament.
Always the bridesmaids, man. Always the bridesmaids. That's okay. That's okay. They know. Like, we're too out there. We're too out there. People don't know what to do with us, Jack, because we're Reformed guys that like to have fun and talk about fun stuff. And, they just don't know what to do.
Did you
joking. Just
speaking of churches, what'd you do for your Lord's Day there, sir?
This last Lord's Day was my first one back, which was great. But it was also, I had zero energy. So I felt like I was in a fog the entire time. Right. But what we're doing is we're actually preparing to go through we're sorry, my brain fog. We are bringing in a new liturgy into our Lord's Day service, and part of that is doing a very short series on the Lord's Supper and baptism, so the sacraments, right? Because we want people to know, okay, this is why we believe what we believe. This is why we practice it the way that we practice it as Reformed Baptists, right? So this last Sunday was Acts chapter 2, verses 38 through 42, basically talking about the call of the gospel, kind of the entrance into the local church membership, what that looks like, and just kind of how they practice that within the early church. So Yeah, so that was this last Lord's Day, and I think it was my week. I had pastoral prayer and the benediction, to which my wife told me my pastoral prayer was long. She said it was long.
Ooh.
I know. She said it was longer than normal. I chalk that up to being sick. But here's the thing: you keep your boy out of the pulpit for too long, he starts to get that itch, right? Like he starts to, I start to feel like, man, I start to get preachy, and I'm just saying, like, you can't. It's not my fault, is what I'm trying to say. It's not my fault. But I just finished writing up a little booklet for our church on the confession of sin and assurance of pardon, what it is, what it isn't, and what it's for. And we're going to give that to our members at our next members meeting for them to look over. And that'll be kind of the next iteration of liturgical elements, if you will, into the service. So I'm excited, man. I love stuff like this kind of local church stuff. I really, really enjoy. I kind of nerd out on it, and I enjoy seeing people kind of grasp that understanding and love for like old things.
Yeah,
like a nice liturgical service. I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm really excited for that stuff coming down the pike. How about you? How was Lord's Day? What'd you guys do?
Yeah, it was good. I think it started kind of on Saturday because I taught at our monthly men's breakfast.
Tell me how that went, dude. I was excited to hear you did that.
Oh my gosh!
I heard it was uneventful.
No, it definitely was not. So we're going over it. It's basically we engage in a couple different a topic basically a month, and we were talking about basically everything summed up in like planning, decision making, basically like how do you be a leader who has vision, but also can adapt and pivot and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So tied to it, like, well, I'll usually preface because it's like a video series we're watching, and we'll watch the clip, and then we'll go through like some stuff that the speaker is putting in, like some fill in the blanks, and then I'll start asking bigger group questions, like for the larger kind of audience, and then we break up into like groups of like 3 or 4 men, and then ask smaller questions from there, and then pray. There was a particular guy that is pretty raw in the faith, who was like, it's like, I think there's always like this,
like definitely a very new believer.
Yes.
Like, if a believer at all.
Yeah. But man, he was pretty raw and was just, letting it loose with the tongue a little bit, and drop some S-bombs and some F-bombs here and there.
Man.
It's like,
man.
Oh boy. And then thankfully one of my pastors was like sitting right next to him. And so I was kind of like looking at my pastor, and I'm just like, I'm glad he's sitting next to him, but Lord. And then I could feel like he's like, okay, we should wrap this up, because this guy's going to control the conversation a little bit too much.
Sure.
Which is okay. He has something to say, because I don't think he's ever been in that kind of environment before. And he really wants to, let his voice be known to a certain degree. But yeah, there's always a time and place, but very interesting. So that went actually pretty well, all things considered. But then on Sunday, we wrapped up our kind of spiritual disciplines, becoming the image of Christ series, with just the simple act of abiding in Jesus. Like that last bookend from John chapter 15, where Jesus talks about, I am the vine, you are the branches.
Right.
It very much bookends to what we started in with Psalm 1, which is, you are like a tree planted by a river kind of idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking a lot about that. And then the next series we're going into, pretty interesting. We're doing a whole sermon series from next Sunday until Easter on Romans chapter 8, baby.
Oh, here we go.
We are deep diving in this stuff.
You're pulling out the ribeye steak.
We're going like a couple verses per Lord's Day.
Yeah.
And then all kind of crescendoing in 31 to 39 on Easter Sunday. And I am contributing to some of like our study guide material that we do.
Awesome.
Each Lord's Day, there's going to be a study guide. So when people are in their community groups, you use that study guide to kind of look at the text and do some deep dives into it.
Right.
So,
but
yeah, that's kind of what we're going into next.
That's exciting.
And then I think, trying to remember if we're doing a prophetic book after Easter. And then I know this summer I might be preaching for kind of like a culminating thing for like my Pastors and Leaders Institute thing that I do at my local church.
Yeah.
So I might be, I don't know. I've heard inklings that it could be like whatever your favorite text is, you can go and preach out of that, or it's a predetermined text. But I've heard whatever your favorite text is, you can preach out of that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we'll see what we got there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now,
but we did that, and then Super Bowl Sunday with a family from our community group. We basically
the Chiefs get absolutely trounced.
Dude, I brought a family pack of Little Caesars, the Crazy Puffs. Have you seen these?
Oh yeah.
The little they're a muffin.
Yeah.
Those things are amazing, dude. Those are better than anything. Did you get
the ones with bacon in them?
Oh, dude. I got every single kind of them.
They're so good.
And it was like, wow, Little Caesars. If you just made one item alone and just made your Crazy Puffs, like this would be it, dude. Yep. This is like your money maker right here. So
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your kind of thought process through developing a sermon, right? There's a lot of debate these days, and I've seen it somewhat recently online, not as much now, but there's that whole debate between do you transcribe your sermons or do you do notes, right?
Yeah.
And what's always interesting to me with this particular topic is how people will take almost a moral stance.
Oh yeah.
One way or the other. Right? That if you're not, like, if you're transcribing, you're not actually preaching. You're not actually delivering the word the way that it's supposed to be, right? And then on the flip side, they'll say, well, if you're not transcribing, then you're just kind of going off the handle or whatever, shooting at the hip. There's no prep. There's right, and there's a lot of junk and shots being thrown over each other's bow, and I think it's an interesting conversation and an important one, because even within local churches, you'll have elders that approach preaching differently, right?
Yeah,
that's how it is with our elder team, right? That I serve in. We don't approach that the same way, right? But I think the forest can kind of get lost through the tree. Excuse me. I said influenza. I'm still dealing with it.
Yeah.
The forest can kind of get lost through the trees a little bit, and that we lose the main point of what we're supposed to be doing. So I would like to pitch it over to you first and ask you, because you've gone through kind of the Simeon Trust training and things like that, right?
Yep.
I would like to know your personal style when you're putting together a sermon. Are you a transcribe guy or are you a notes guy?
This is really tough. I would rather do notes for like a teaching time that I just did on Saturday.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit more intimate and you can kind of fly off the hip a little bit.
Sure. Yep.
And be a little bit more casual with how you teach.
Definitely a different setting for sure.
Yeah. I would say transcribing, to be honest, is I've done it in ways where I have partially transcribed, meaning that I have written out a sermon or I've written parts or outlines of a sermon that basically kind of does that.
Yeah.
I know. So through Simeon Trust, they really teach you how to go deep into the text.
Right.
And I really think that's important for your audience. Because they go through basically like it's like a line by line. It's like if you were interviewing somebody for like if they got arrested, you know, it's like what's the historical context? What's the actual textual areas that this part of the text that you're preaching in is at?
Right.
And then on top of that, they're asking you a lot of questions. And then on top of it, they're basically saying, okay, just do a simple outline. If you were to preach this, Simeon Trust really wants you to put the legwork in more of like your study time so that you're prepared for the content,
right,
versus how you deliver it. Because how you deliver it can be done, I mean, depending upon how much time you're acquainted with in public speaking and in preaching, it can be pretty easy. So I would say the legwork more often should be done in your prep time of what the text says and where it's going. And you can integrate that into how you outline your sermon. And then honestly, I would do it that way. So if I'm going to write a sermon today, I would probably do all the legwork that's done to understand the text and then start outlining my sermon.
Yeah.
And then transcribing my sermon.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Other people can do it other ways. And I'm sure in that transcription as well, too, I might make edits to that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I don't know why people are so dogmatic about this. But listen, we're Christians. We can fight over whether you sing psalms or sing hymns, for crying out loud. Okay, it's like if you sing this song, you're a heretic. If you don't sing this song, you're a heretic.
Exactly.
You just bicker over anything. To be quite honest,
we will. Yeah. Well, and I think part of the reason it's such a thing for some guys is because it's a very personal thing. Right? Like preaching, I think there's a lot of identity for guys wrapped up in their preaching. Because look, like it or not, we live in a world of comparison, and that affects the church, right? You can't, every preacher at one time or another has either had someone compare them to another preacher or they've compared themselves. It's just, you just do it naturally because that's who we are as humans, right? I'm not saying it's good. You shouldn't do that, but we do. It's what happens. So, but I think because of that, there's often a lot of identity, and for many guys, insecurity that's wrapped up in that, right? And I remember when I was, they say, some pastors have said, you don't find your preaching voice until you've preached, 400 to 500 times. And I don't know if that's true. I do think that there is truth to the fact that you need to find your own voice, right? I remember when I was first preaching, I was a very young man, probably shouldn't have been behind the pulpit, but that's where the Lord had me. I remember doing my darndest to sound like preachers that I admired. Right. Yeah. That's what I did. It's like, okay, these guys I hold as kind of the best preachers of the day. So this is who I want to sound like. This is who I want to emulate. Right. And to one degree, it's not bad to look at those that are proficient in their craft, if you will, and seek to learn from them. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing to look at someone like R.C. Sproul and see, like, look at how he taught. Look at how he handled himself when he taught. Like, there's things to emulate there. There's things to try to learn from, right? The problem is you go from emulating and using it to learn to just copying. Right. And you start saying things the same way and using the same phrases and the same stories. And you even shape the way you preach like your cadence and the contour of the things you say. You shape it around, and you can tell, like, oh, that person is copying John MacArthur. That person's copying Steve Lawson, right? R.I.P. And you, as the preacher, right, you want to find your own voice, and that takes time and that takes effort. And you can do that whether you're a notes guy or you're a transcription guy, right? The point is, obviously the point of the most important, make sure that what you're saying is true, right? And to Jack's point, doing the legwork beforehand is really, really important, right? And this is something that this is something that I was taught, and something that I tell guys that want to try to get into preaching also, like all of the historical context, right? And the authorial intent and the Greek or the Hebrew, all of that stuff, that should all inform your preaching. That should not be in your preaching. And I know some guys disagree with that, and that's okay. But the point of preaching is not to provide the historical context or the Greek or the authorial intent of those things, right? It's not that those things can't make an appearance here and there.
Yeah.
But too many guys just take their prep and turn their prep into the sermon, turn that into preaching. That's not the point of preaching. The point of preaching is what, ultimately, as Spurgeon would say, where's the gospel here? Where is Christ? Make your beeline to Christ in the gospel, right? But ultimately is, what is this text saying in light of who God is, who we are, and how should we respond to it? It's thus saith the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Now that preaching needs to be informed, and that's where that prep comes in, right? But whether you are a notes guy or a transcribe guy or something a little, in between, it's important that you understand what the purpose and the point of preaching is, right? And that's to make Christ known to your people, that they might know him better and live a life that is according to his image more, right? And it's not to impress with all of the Greek and the historical context and all of that stuff that informs what you say. But it truly is a proclamation, right? And in the whole debate, that's something that I try to hammer through is, if you're going to be if you're going to be a notes guy, make sure that you're not just ad-libbing. Like, you're not Spurgeon. You're not gonna be the guy that gets up there with, a blank piece of paper and just shoots from the hip, unless you're Ed, who just somehow is able to do that, right? Ed and Spurgeon, the only two guys I know that can do that, right? Make sure that you are prepared. Make sure that your notes are informed, that you know where you're going, right? On the flip side, if you're a transcribe guy, my encouragement to them is this: make sure that you're not just up there reading a script.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the really difficult thing with transcribing, is you can often get into the rut of, you have your sermon all written out, but often how people write is not how people talk.
Yeah.
And I can tell when someone is preaching from a transcript, because it sounds like the way that they would write, not the way that they would proclaim. Right. And that's the tough part with transcribing, is you want to make sure that even in the way that you transcribe it down, you're doing it in a way that's going to reach out to not only the minds, but also the heart of your people. And that you're not up there just a stick in the mud, right? Reading notes.
Yeah.
Right.
Seriously.
Because preaching should be engaging. It's a proclamation. Right? I'm not saying you got to be, the Billy Graham out there and shaking your fist and being, but it shouldn't be boring.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be something that we listen to and is just droning on, right? We should show that we believe what we're saying. That should come through in the way that we present it, right? I am a big advocate of, whether you're a notes guy or a transcribe guy, I should see what you're saying in your face, and I should hear it in your voice. Like, I want you to inform not only my mind and my heart, as you should, but also my emotions.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not in this touchy feely charismatic way. I know a lot of people might take it that way. It's that preaching should affect and speak to the whole person. And our emotions should be stirred. If you're preaching on the effects of sin, I want to hear that in your voice. I want to see that.
Yeah.
I want to hear that in the way that you communicate. If you're preaching about the joys of heaven and the future that we have, I want to hear that. I want to feel that. I want to know that you believe it and that you're looking forward to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's conviction behind your proclamation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think you can do that whether you transcribe or whether you're just notes. I think it comes down to obviously what you're saying, but also how you say it. I think that's an important thing that a lot of pastors would do well to remember is I do want my heart and my mind to be informed, but I want my emotions to be informed as well. Not that it's the barometer of truth, that if I don't come away from a sermon feeling a certain way, then it was a bad sermon. That's not at all what I'm saying. But the gospel should affect our emotions.
Yeah.
The truth of Scripture should affect us emotionally.
Yeah.
It should, because we're emotional people. Right? It's being part of, of who we are. So I think it's a good thing to inform those things as well. So, but yeah, any. 'Cause I've heard some boring preachers. Man.
Oh,
and preaching shouldn't be boring.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be boring.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing, and it's one of those things where I'm extremely thankful for the men in my life that handled the word well, whether they were dynamic or not. Right? Ultimately, I want what you're saying to be true, right? But I'm talking on just a personal level. If you wanting to get better as a preacher and you're wanting to become more honed in that skill, listen and watch how, guys like, again, like R.C. Sproul or Sinclair Ferguson or Alistair Begg, they do an excellent job at informing the emotions when they preach. And I think they do it well without being trite or gimmicky. I think there's you see a lot of those reels on Instagram where it's just a gimmick, and the guy's like spitting in his hand and rubbing it in his brother-in-law's face. Who was that joke?
Oh my gosh.
Todd.
Oh my
somebody.
gosh. Yeah.
Todd somebody, or yeah. That's don't do that.
Yeah, that's no, what you said is good. I think also too, like you said, Josh, like you need to find your own voice.
Yeah.
As a preacher when you're preaching. I honestly will rely more on just like my public speaking voice.
Yeah, sure.
If anything, to like preach. Like I don't try to like go too crazy beyond that. I think I tried before and it just did not sound really cool. It just sounded like I was acting or something like that, or trying to do an impression.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It takes time. It takes time.
But yeah, I mean, I think you're right on in saying like, yeah, where's the beef? Where's the gospel in your sermon? Where are you trying to head to?
Yeah.
Where are you trying to take us to? Like the goal of your preaching should be to take the congregation that you're preaching to a place to where you're explaining what the text is, but you're also landing the plane and knowing where it's going as far as the gospel is too.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people don't want to do that because you'll get accused of being gospel centered or something like that. It's just ridiculous. I think those are the more ridiculous statements these days of your preaching sounds gospel centered.
I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you.
Well, shouldn't it be?
Yeah.
The
guys online that'll rail against guys like Jared Wilson, and things like that for his stance on being gospel centered. I think, one, it's completely immature, and two, it's, if it's not gospel centered, if it's not Christ centered, then it's going to be you're missing the point. You're missing the point of preaching. You're missing the point of where you're supposed to be going with the text, what you're supposed to be doing with the text. Anywhere you are in Scripture, the point and the question to ask is, where is Jesus? Where's Jesus here? Because he's there. The entire Bible's about him. So that's a whole ep in and of itself. The goofy railing against the gospel centered guys. I just don't understand, because maybe there's something about it I don't get, but why would I not want my preaching to be gospel centered?
Mike Todd is the
Mike
guy
Todd. That's the Joker. Yeah, he spit all over his hand and
I think he's like in Tulsa or something along those lines.
Oh, so bad. Anyway, notes or transcribe. Make it Christ centered. Proclaim the word. Be faithful to put the work in, and show people Jesus. That's the point of preaching. Where is Jesus, right? And whether you are you've been honing that skill for 50 years or you're brand new, your job's the same. And there's grace there. And continue to press into that and hone that skill and learn how to even better handle the Word of God and present it. And that's what we do. And it's a good thing, and it's an exciting thing, and it's worth it. So, Jack, you want to get us out of here, man? I feel like this has been an episode sponsored by Mucinex or something.
Oh,
like
Mucinex.
Mucinex. I am out of it.
Yeah. Well, people, ladies and gentlemen, if you appreciate Josh and I's work on a local church focus for you, that your local church would be the center of your Christian life, and that out of that you would see flourishing. We pray that you would follow us and interact with us on the sociables, if you will, the metaverse, the Facebook, the Instagram, goes well with chocolate and marshmallow, and always the sociable formerly known as Twitter, X. You can tag us at one of those sociable sites at the tag at Reformatory Pod, and send us a direct message about an episode idea you want to hear. Anything else you have questions for us about previous episodes or next kind of foreshadowing episodes. But yeah, you can find us on those sociables. Josh, you could tell the lovely people how they might support us in other ways here.
That's right. Okay, we're gonna go machine gun style through these. You can rate this podcast, review this podcast on Apple and Spotify. We would appreciate it. Link in the description of this episode is a link to Amazon. We partnered with them for merch. There's cool shirts. More designs on the way. Go get some reformatory merch. Tag us in the post. We love sharing those. That's a lot of fun. You can head on over to YouTube, right? Like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell, as the kids say. We appreciate that. Last but not least, we have a Patreon. You can head on over to Patreon for $5 a month. That's all it is. You get bonus episodes. I just put up a new song that I'm working on. Patreon's members just got a sneak peek of a new song, which may or may not feature a couple quotes from Papa Sproul in the song itself, which I'm excited about.
Okay.
But you got to head on over to Patreon to get the good stuff, the exclusive stuff. Our pledge to you, if you do that, is that your name shall be hallowed.
Hallowed, sir. Hallowed.
Hallowed through the halls of the podcast. That is our pledge to you. We thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the next step of the Reformatory.